Hi there, and thank you for tuning in. You're watching a Sip and Art video tutorial where we are going to walk through step by step how to make this unique wall art in a mixed media format using a variety of products from Prima Marketing Inc. So we are going to walk through step by step, but first I'm going to show you all the materials that we need to create this project. Starting off, we will be using some decoupage papers. These are the Mulberry tissue papers from Redesign with Prima, and I just chose two different kinds. We're going to have a 2x2 wooden board that we're covering. So this will be our first step. Our second step, we are going to use a stick and style stencil roll. That is this pretty pattern right here in gold. And to do the gold, we're going to be using Art Alchemy acrylic paint in the color Gold Rush. You can use any color you wish. I'm using this pretty gold. Next, we are going to add our, let's see, this is a large stencil pattern here. And with the large stencil pattern, I'm going to actually be using this stencil for this piece. With that, we're going to be using icing paste. And it is, this color is called Red Amber. It comes in multiple different colors, but we're going to be using this pretty kind of reddish amber metallic color today with our stencil. And we will be applying that with a spread pal from Redesign with Prima, which is this little rubber squeegee. And it makes applying the icing paste super easy. We're also going to be applying some molds. These are Redesigned with Prima molds. I picked In the Garden and In Bloom. You can choose any molds that you like. I'm going to be using the Florals today. And typically, I would make my molds with modeling material, also from Redesign with Prima. It's kind of like an air dry clay, but it takes overnight, and this project was designed to get done in about an hour to 2 hours. So for today's project, we're going to be using hot glue in our molds. And I will show you how to do that and then apply those. The very last layer to our mixed media art is a Decor transfer from Redesign with Prima. They come in a variety of different styles and patterns and colors. Today I'm using this one called Wondrous Floral. It's got all these really beautiful colors of flowers, so I decided that I wanted to use that to really add a lot of color to my piece. Some additional items that you're going to need to complete this project are 3D matte gel, and that's what we're going to be using to apply our decoupage tissue to our wood panel. So the 3D matte gel, which dries transparent, and it works as an adhesive. And then I'm also going to use a little bit of spray adhesive on my tissue. This step is optional, you don't have to do it. I think that it adds a little bit more grab and tack to the tissue paper and helps secure it a little bit more, but this step is optional. I've also got a little foam pouncer to apply my gold paint to my stencil. You can use a brush, you can use a foam roller. I just have this little pouncer that will work perfectly, so that's what I'm going to use. And then I've just got a chip brush that we're going to use to apply our 3D matte gel with our decoupage paper. I've also got a glue gun for making our molds with, and some extra glue sticks. So I'm going to start off by showing you how to decoupage the Mulberry tissue paper onto the wood board. So I've got my wood board here. And this is a 2x2 foot wooden board. It is, I believe, birch plywood. You can use any kind of board. This one's about 1/4 of an inch thick. You can use a canvas, you can use a wooden board. I like the wooden board. It's nice and rigid, and it takes the materials and the adhesives really well, and it's durable. So we're going to start by, see, we've got our Mulberry tissue paper, and I've got patterns Zoe and Giselle. But like I said, you can choose any two that you wish. If you're using the Redesign with Prima Mulberry tissue papers, you will need 2 tubes. So our wooden board is just blank, and I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna open up, first I'm gonna open up my first tissue paper. I'm going to start with the Giselle, which is this pretty floral one. And I'm gonna open that. Pull that out. And it comes in sheets. So we're going to apply 1 sheet at a time, and we're going to start from the top, and then we'll do the next sheet down. I'm going to start by taking my 3D matte gel and my chip brush, and I'm just going to basically paint it on. And I want to work fairly quickly because I don't want my matte gel to dry up on me while I'm applying it. So I'm just going to go ahead and paint it on this top portion where I plan to put my mulberry tissue paper. You could also use Mod Podge or really any kind of archival adhesive that is almost a, that is brushable. I like to be able to brush it on. That way we can avoid clumps and bubbles and wrinkles, and it sticks really well. Because if you start getting clumps and bubbles, or bubbles and wrinkles, then your piece won't last. Your tissue paper over time will start coming up. So you want to have it as good and adhered as possible. So I'm going to go ahead and take my spray adhesive. And like I said, this part is optional. I like it just as kind of a little safeguard to make sure that my tissue is going to stick. Take my spray adhesive and to the back of my tissue. Make sure you're spraying it on the back. You want to spray it to the back of your tissue. Okay, and then we're going to go ahead and apply. I'm going to go ahead and line this up in the one of the corners. In this case, I'm taking the top right-hand corner. So I'm going to line it up, make sure it's lined up on the side. And then just smooth out any wrinkles. This tissue paper, this mulberry tissue paper from Redesign with Prima, it is super easy to work with. So a lot of like paper tissues can tear or wrinkle or bubble when you're using them with the decoupage method. I really like the mulberry tissue paper. It feels almost like a fabric. So it goes on like fabric, it feels like a fabric, and it's very easy to smooth out any wrinkles. So it looks really good. I'm gonna go ahead and cut off my excess over here. Got some scissors, and I'm just gonna cut off my excess on this side. Super easy. And now I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna work on applying my second piece. Right like that. So I am going to repeat my steps. I'm going to repeat my steps for my next section of the mulberry tissue paper, and then I'm going to get out my second pattern, and I'm going to do the bottom section with the second pattern. It just adds a little bit of variety to use 2 different kinds. You could use all the same kind if you want, but you will need 2 tubes if you're using the mulberry. So while we are allowing our tissue paper background to dry, we're gonna go ahead and make our hot glue molds so that those can go ahead and set up, and then we can attach them and paint them. So I'm just using a high temperature glue gun with the large sticks. I find that the high temperature guns and glues seem to work the best for making molds. So I'm just going to fill up each of my molds. I've got this larger flower here called In Bloom, and then this one here is called In the Garden, and it's several smaller flowers. I'm just trying to keep with my floral theme, but you can use any of the Redesign with Prima molds. There's scrolls and trim work and swirlies and all kinds of emblems. I'm especially partial to the florals. So I'm just going to start by filling in, filling in the wells of my mold. And I like the high temperature glue, like I said, and glue gun. It seems to fill in the space, the cavities a little bit better, and kind of reduce the number of bubbles that you have. So that's why I like to use the high temperature. And that's just my preference. So I'm just going to fill in each well in the mold, just like so. And there we go. So just like that. And I'm going to go ahead and fill in all the rest of my molds. Okay, so while our hot glue moldings are setting up, we can go ahead and do our next step, which is a stick and style stencil roll. Stick and style stencil roll is an adhesive stencil that comes on a roll. They're both reusable and disposable. You can throw them away, you can reuse them. They're the perfect amount of adhesive, not to pull up paint, but they are also, so you can pull it up and reuse it. So these are really great. This style that we're using is called Calypso Lattice. And we are going to go ahead and we're going to do a strip across here around where our two tissue papers meet. So we're just going to pull off as much as we need and line that up straight right about here. I'm just going to use my bottom tissue paper as a straight edge to line that up so I know it's nice and straight. And then I'll just simply cut off the roll. Go ahead and make sure that that is adhered well. And I've got my little dabber, my little spongy dabber that I'm going to use. Like I said, you can use a brush, you can use a roller. This with the adhesive, it really prevents the bleed of the paint from underneath the stencil. You know how sometimes you get with a regular stencil. The adhesive is great for preventing that. So I'm using Gold Rush from Art Alchemy, which is in their metallic line. It's just an acrylic paint from Prima, and I'm going to use my little dabber, kind of load that up with paint, and I'm just going to start dabbing on my gold. You could pour your paint out on the little plate if you wish. I'm just using it straight out of the bottle or the little jar. And I think these little spongy dabbers make it super easy. And if you don't want to fill in the whole thing, every little space, every little opening, you can just kind of dab on randomly and get a more, what's the word? Distressed type stencil look, if that makes sense. Or aged, you know. These metallic paints from Art Alchemy come in a variety of really beautiful metallic colors. There's some really pretty ones. I love these paints. They cover so well and they're super richly pigmented. They're my favorite acrylic paints to use. Okay, we've almost got it covered. See how easy that is? And I love these stencils. I love the patterns. It just adds a nice texture and interest to your piece. I'm just gonna go over that one more time real quick. And then all we're gonna do is peel it up. I like to pull from each side. So I like to pull from each side and just go up so I don't smear anything. Easy peasy. And look how crisp my stencil is. I absolutely love these stick and style stencil rolls. Okay, so I believe that our hot glue molds are set up. You know what? We're gonna go ahead and do our one more step before the hot glue molds are added. We're going to do our stenciling with the icing paste. So I've got my stencil. So for the one behind me, I used a large 3D stencil from Redesign with Prima. For this one, I want to use a different pattern. It's similar but different. This one is a paver stencil, concrete paver stencil, and they're nice and thick. I love these stencils. They're super thick, which helps a lot when you're doing raised or textured stenciling, which with the icing paste, depending on how thick or thin you apply it, you can get some texture and a raised effect. If you put it on pretty thin, you'll get, you know, less of a texture or raised effect. But in either case, these are really nice stencils. I like to take my spray adhesive again, and I like to spray the back of my stencil so it sticks and reduces the bleed through, similar to the stick and style. So I like to just spray a little bit on the back and just let that dry for just a second. Just gonna let it dry for a second so that it's not wet, but we want it tacky. And that will help hold my stencil in place a little bit. All right, so I'm gonna go ahead and grab my icing paste and my spread pal from Redesign with Prima. And these come in a package of 2, and there's 2 different sizes. This is a larger one. And they really are awesome for spreading around and applying your icing paste or chalk paste, whichever you're using. But in this case, we're using the icing paste, which comes in a variety of colors, and they are all metallic. Look how yummy that is. Isn't that beautiful? So we're gonna start by grabbing a little bit on our spread pal, just about that much, a decent sized dab or so. And then once our stencil is dried to a tack, we're going to put it where we want it, place it on the art. So I think we're gonna do our molds up here in this corner. So let's do a little bit of a background in our stencil. So see how that just sticks with the spray adhesive? It's awesome. So I'm gonna go over my stencil with my icing paste, And I'm gonna make sure that I fill in, you know, some of the design, but I don't have to fill in all of it. See on the one behind me how it's kind of an uneven edge? It's like the more worn looking type pattern when you don't fill in the whole thing. So we're just gonna fill in parts of it. And like I said, this stencil is pretty thick, so it is gonna make for a raised or dimensional stenciling. So we will fill in this little bottom part here to finish out that little design. And then I'm going to scrape off my excess. You don't have to. If you don't, it adds some texture, but for purposes of this project, I want it to dry a little faster. So I'm gonna try to scrape off the excess. So again, like I removed the other stencil, I'm gonna pull up from two ends, pull up so it doesn't smudge, and voila. Isn't that so pretty? I love the icing paste, it's so beautiful. I think I'm gonna go ahead and come down here in this corner and do a little bit of the stenciling down here in this corner. And then we'll put our transfer there and our molds somewhere over here. So just a little bit more to go. Then we'll let this dry. And if you would like to speed up the drying process a little bit, you can use a heat gun or hair dryer. Just don't hold it in one place for too long. You don't want to burn your icing paste. It will bubble and burn if you heat it up too much. So you just want to go at it carefully with a hair dryer or a heat gun to kind of speed up the process for class purposes. And we're just, again, spreading this on kind of randomly, not filling in the whole thing. All right, wipe off my excess. You can use a palette knife too if you don't have a spread pal. These make it super easy, but a palette knife would also work. Okay, so we're gonna pull that up. And look at that. I don't know if you can see the dimension that I'm getting, but since the stencil is so thick, I'm getting a lot of dimension on my stencil, and it's really pretty. It's very nice. See if I'll bring it in a little bit closer, see if you can see it better. You see the dimension on the stencil? Really nice. Okay, so we are going to go ahead and let that dry, and then we're going to clean up our glue molds and apply those and then get them painted. Okay, so we're ready to pop out our glue molds, and we're just going to pop them out of these silicone molds. Super easy. These molds are also food safe, heat resistant. You could you know, you could even make chocolate or candy in these. They clean up really well, and they're super nice molds. Redesign with Prima makes amazing molds. Here's our bigger one. And I'm going to grab a sharp knife. So I've got this little utility knife here, and I'm just gonna go around and clean up the edges of my glue mold. See how there's a little bit of extra that kind of spilled out of the mold when I was making it. I'm just gonna pull off any strings and clean up those edges. You could paint your molds, let them dry, and then attach them to your art piece. Or you can attach them and then paint them, which is what I think that I'm gonna do, but you can go in either order. It's really whatever is easiest for you. If you don't have the steadiest hand, you might wanna paint them before attaching them, but I'm gonna go ahead and attach them first. So once I get the edges all cleaned up, I'm gonna go ahead and place my biggest one first. And I'm thinking we'll go right about, oh, let's go right about here with that guy. So I'm gonna attach it with my hot glue. Same hot glue as I used to make the molds, I'm using to attach them. And just right there, boom. Okay, so there is mold number one. I'm gonna go ahead and clean up the edges on the rest of my molds, and I didn't do too bad, so there's not a whole lot of cleaning up I need to do on these little guys. You could also make molds with resin, or like I showed you earlier, the modeling material. There's several different kinds of air dry clays on the market you could also use. I have the most luck with the hot glue though, and it sets quickly. So if you're a little bit impatient like me, it satisfies your impatience because they're done rather quickly. You don't have to wait overnight, and they're still flexible. So sometimes as resin sets, it can get rigid and it's not flexible any longer. So that is the downside of using the resin. And I'm just placing my floral moldings wherever I kind of think I want them. Like I said, there's so many different types and patterns of molds. You could do scroll work, you could do trim work, you could really get crazy with it and do whatever kind of suits your fancy. We're going to paint these in the same Art Alchemy metallic paint that we did this stencil in. You can choose a different one. I am going to be using the same gold, but you could, if you want some more color, you could choose any of the other colors. Let's put this guy right here. I think he'll go well right there. Yeah, right there. There, and then we have one little leaf left. Little leaf, we're going to clean that up and add him. Okay. Be careful not to burn your fingers on the little guys like this. I'm going to add this little leaf right here. Maybe here. We'll go in there so it extends up. Yeah, let's go right here. Go right, coming out of there. So we're done with the glue gun, and I'm going to go ahead and before I paint my molds, I'm going to go ahead and apply my transfers down here. So again, you can choose any style or pattern of transfer that you wish. I am going to be using the Wondrous Floral because I love all the colors, and I'm just going to kind of pick and choose which flowers I want and cut them out and kind of customize it. So this is a great way to use up if you have scraps of transfers, which I always keep my scraps because you never know what kind of project you're going to need just a little bit of transfer on. So I always keep my scraps, and this is a great project for getting rid of scraps or using them up. So I've got this chunk of flowers right here. I could put, you know, in the corner there. Would look really great. In the corner, we've got these flowers here. They're a little more chopped up, as you can see. I've used them, and the same with these. I could use those, but I'd have to cut them up individually and place them, which is fine. But I think I'm going to go ahead and go with the first little set of flowers that I pulled out, and go ahead and figure out where I want to place that. So let's see. I'm going to grab my scissors And I'm just gonna kind of cut a few little parts off here that I don't want to include. A little lone leaf here, I'm gonna cut him out. I love that you can customize the transfers however you see fit. That's my favorite thing to do, is cut and layer and mix and match transfers. So when I got that how I want it, now I gotta fit it on here. And I think I'm gonna come up like this. Yeah, just right up that. So I'm gonna line up this edge over here, which means I'll probably have to cut off a little bit on the bottom. I'll have to cut off these leaves here, and that's fine. Let's see. I'm just gonna kind of crease where I need to cut it with my fingernail. And you can measure it or freehand cut it or whatever. I like to make a little crease, and then I grab my handy dandy paper cutter, which is just so happens to be the width of transfer, so it works perfectly. And cut it right on that crease there that I made. And make sure one more time that it is how I want it. And beautiful. Adds a lot of color, doesn't it? So I'm going to slowly peel off the backing paper on my transfer. And the reason why I do it slowly is because I want to make sure the graphic doesn't come off on the backing paper, which can happen from time to time. And if you pull it slowly, you can kind of prevent that or catch it before you mess your transfer up. And pull that off, and be careful not to let it fold back up on itself, because then you've ruined your transfer. And also, you don't want to touch the adhesive back. You want to handle it very carefully so you don't touch the sticky back. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and kind of eyeball, make sure it's kind of lining up where I want before I place it down permanently. I'm going to make sure it's in the right spots. So it's lining up on this side and the bottom. There we go. Okay, so now that I have it where I want it, I can rub it on just a little bit more firmly. And I'm going to be using a transfer tool from the Redesign with Prima. It's this little plastic burnishing stick. Mine's a little broken. It looks like a mermaid tail usually, but I broke it today. I was rubbing a little bit too hard, but it's got a bigger end and a smaller end, and then a little hook on the corner there to help go around edges and in grooves and details. So that's pretty handy. So I am going to go over my whole transfer firmly with my transfer tool. And of course, before you move on to applying your transfer, you want to make sure everything underneath it is dry. Your stencil, your decoupage layer, you want to make sure it's dry, because the transfer will not stick to anything wet or any moisture. It's got to be dry. I'm just going to burnish or rub my whole transfer with my tool. The transfers come with little wooden sticks, kind of like a big popsicle stick, and you can use those to apply the transfers as well. They work just fine. I just like my transfer tool because it's got a little bit bigger of a surface area. Makes it just a little bit easier, but the wooden stick works just fine. And that comes with every transfer. So I'm going to burnish my whole transfer with this stick. Once I'm pretty sure that I've rubbed the whole thing in, I'm going to start from one corner and very slowly start to peel it back. And the reason why I'm going slowly is so that if I run into a little spot that I have not gotten adhered very well, I can just roll my backing paper back down and give it a good rub again, and then hopefully it will stick second time around. Looks like it's sticking pretty good, which is awesome. Great. It's best to seal transfers. So you can seal the transfers with clear wax or water-based sealer like a polyacrylic of sorts. Whatever you prefer. On artwork like this, I'll most likely use a clear water-based satin sealer. But on furniture, I like to use clear wax because I'm a fan of the finish, but I also use a lot of satin sealer as well. All right, cool. So our transfer is on. And that is actually our last step. So we'll just go back and paint our molds, but this was our last layer. I'm gonna go ahead and go over it with my finger. You can also use a soft cloth or a super fine grit sandpaper and lightly go over it or firmly press with your fingers. And you wanna make sure you pop any bubbles or smooth out any wrinkles. If you have wrinkles or bubbles during this part of the process, if you don't pop those or get those out, your transfer could start to lift in the future. So you may have a problem on your hands if you don't get that adhered properly from the get-go. You can also use a soft cloth to do this. I like to use my finger, but sometimes I use a microfiber or lint-free soft cloth. Okay, so we're on there pretty good. And now all we have to do is paint our moldings, and then we'll let the whole thing sit and dry, and then we'll be all done. So I've got just an art brush, a small art brush, and I'm just going to go and paint all my moldings with my Art Alchemy Metallic Gold Rush is the color I'm using. So you can use any color you want. I am partial to gold. I love gold, so that is what I'm using. So I'm gonna go ahead and go through and paint that whole thing and let it dry, and then I'll be ready to hang my beautiful piece of unique art.